have Mr. Buse with you this morning too?
I do.
Anyone else?
I have Mr. Evans, who submitted an affidavit previously. I don't know that he's going to say anything. And
You hear us okay? They've changed the
oh yeah, I'm hearing you fine.
Fantastic.
Who just joined us, please? Hello?
Yes, this is Trevor. Fine.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is anybody on the phone with us that hasn't had a chance to check in yet?
Who just joined us, please? Who just joined us, please?
Yeah, this is Trevor Klein on the phone here.
I don't think so. Yeah. He's not here now. I don't think he's coming. All right, it's 8:31. I think we have with us who's going to be with us. So just as soon as I can get set up here, I will call this meeting of the Tennessee Highway Official Certification Board to order for Thursday, March the 17th, 2016. Kathy, if you could take the roll. Start.
Mr. Portman?
Here.
Mr. Mason? Mr. Cord? Here. Mr. Wormsley?
Here.
Mr. Dodd?
Here. So we've got 4 members present, constitutes a quorum. Mr. Macy couldn't be with us this morning. The first item on our agenda would typically be the review of our minutes. Due to some family circumstances, I have not had a chance to fully review the draft that we have prepared, so it was not ready for circulation for this meeting, and so we will catch up on our minutes at our next meeting. And so with that, we'll jump into the primary reason that we're here, and that is to review the qualifications of applicants who are interested in running for the position of Chief Administrative Officer of the County Highway Department. As we do at each meeting, we will review what those qualifications are. They're found in Tennessee Code Annotated 54-7-104. It lays out 4 different criteria an individual can meet in order to be certified. First, an individual can be a licensed engineer in the state of Tennessee. Second, an individual can be a graduate of an accredited school of engineering with at least 2 years of experience in highway construction or maintenance. Third, an individual can have a combination of education and experience equivalent to either of those first 2, such as licensure in another state. Or finally, an individual can have a minimum of a high school diploma or GED and must demonstrate at least 4 years of supervisory experience in highway construction or maintenance. Those are our statutory framework for reviewing every applicant that comes before the board, and that is what we will again do today. As usual, we will start with the individuals who have been previously certified by this board. As is our policy, all we have required them to demonstrate is proof of their prior certification, and we have 4 who have submitted today based on their previous certification. From Campbell County, Mr. Jimmy Arnold. Also from Campbell County, Mr. John Eugene Darty. From Cheatham County, Mr. James R. Hedgepath. And from Roane County, Mr. Ryan Mullins. And so based on their prior certification. We can take them up together, and we'll take a motion on our previously certified applicants.
Move approval of all the previously certified applicants.
Mr. Wormsley moves approval. Second by Mr. Fortner. And we're all of us are actually present in the room today. We can do this by voice vote. All those in favor of approving our previously certified applicants signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right. Based on that vote, those 4 individuals will be recertified, and we will communicate that to them to get them the documentation they need for the County Election Commission. All right, we have 2 applicants today who are before the board for the first time. First, from Claiborne County, Mr. James Trevor Klein. His application begins on page 13 of your packet, and he has provided a copy of his high school diploma. And so we are looking for 4 years of supervisory experience in highway construction or maintenance. He's on the phone. If we have any questions for him based on the sworn affidavit he filed with us, but I will take questions or discussion or a motion on Mr. Klein from Claiborne County at this time.
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm wondering if Mr. Klein or Klein Excavating was the prime contractor on all this work, or was he a sub to most of it, or what was the nature of the work performed? A little more detail than what was in there.
I was the sub on most of it except for the Seminole project.
So the Seminole Energy, you were the prime, and that was just for a railroad terminal, correct?
Yeah, that was the rail terminal. And then they got with the work for the state to get a better entrance exit off of the 66 over there, and they worked with the state to get them approved a deacceleration lane installed in. And we've done the great work to get that in.
What is your contracting limits with PDOT?
Excuse me?
What's your contracting limit? How large of projects are you authorized to bid for PDOT?
I'm not on the TDOT list.
But you were the prime contractor for that project on Highway 66?
Yeah, that's what they had me listed on. Mr. Maddox, the general manager over there at the time, he is back in Oklahoma now, retired. He had me listed at the bookwork as a general.
And I guess I had a question about that Seminole Energy project as well. You know, we've got to look at highway work as opposed to site work. So how much of that 6 months on that project was spent on the deacceleration lane versus site work for the railroad terminal? Because we can't really consider the site work for the railroad terminal.
Yeah, I was just putting in there, that's what we was over doing at the time. Understand that. Yeah, the deceleration lane probably didn't take us to get that installed about I'm hoping like it took us about 4 weeks to get that in. I was just stating in the paperwork, that's what I was over in that area doing that for them.
Right, and so, you know, we've got to see that supervisory experience in highway construction or maintenance. You know, it may be a month's worth of work on that Seminole Energy project. You've got another handful of projects in here where hauling asphalt. I don't know that merely hauling asphalt rises to the level of what we're looking for.
Yeah. I was just sitting there, do we contract out to the counties and the rock companies and work with them, because you know, time frame what they're needing to get their jobs done.
I'm having a hard time finding the specific details of 4 years of experience.
It's close, I think, based on what we have. Would you want to defer to give him the opportunity to provide us a little more detailed information?
I would be fine with that, and give us more details on the 3 years and exactly what they were doing.
Is there any,
All these, really.
is there any objection to deferring consideration of Mr. Klein's question? All right, hearing none, Mr. Klein, we are going to need a little bit more information from you, and we'll follow up with you following this meeting to see what additional details we can get about some of the work that you've listed here. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for being available this morning.
All right, thank you.
All right, moving on to Hancock County. We've got the application of Mr. Floyd Emery Drennan. He has indicated to us that he has a high school diploma and that we should be looking for 4 years of supervisory experience in highway construction or maintenance. However, the diploma he has provided is from a St. Gregory High School, which really appears to be an online diploma mill. I don't know that it. I have not been able to determine that it is accredited by the State Board of Education, and as our statute requires a high school diploma to be recognized by the State Board of Education, I do not think we can use this diploma in consideration of Mr. Brennan's application. But I will take any
Motion to deny.
motion to deny by Mr. Fortner based on the insufficient showing of the minimum educational requirements. A second by Mr. Wormsley. All those in favor of denying certification to Mr. Drennan signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, based on that vote, we'll communicate that to him. All right, so we are back where we left off last meeting with the application of Mr. Ron Dilbeck from Campbell County. Just to recap, we certified Mr. Dilbeck for the first time a little over a year ago when the Campbell County Road Superintendent's office was vacated by Mr. Dennis Potter. And we certified several candidates at that time, of which Mr. Dilbeck was one. He was then appointed by the Campbell County Commission to serve as the interim until the next election, which is why we're reviewing applicants from Campbell County again, because that will be on this August ballot. Challenge was filed by primarily Mr. Blackie Muse. Mr. Evans has also filed documentation. Several others have filed affidavits on both sides of this issue. And so we have been reviewing all of this information that has been submitted regarding Mr. Dilbeck's qualifications. Mr. Dilbeck and Mr. Potter are here once again with us in person. Mr. Muse, Mr. Evans, and Mr. Dunaway, who's representing Mr. Muse and some other pending litigation against the county and against Mr. Dilbeck, are with us by phone. And so we have an expansive paper record at this point, well over 200 pages of materials that are directly related to Mr. Dilbeck's application. We took a lot of oral testimony at our meeting a few weeks ago. To the extent that the board has questions for individuals who have submitted affidavits to the board. You know, we can take additional oral testimony. I would suggest that we don't want that testimony to be open-ended. You know, to the extent that the board has questions after reviewing the documentation we have in front of us, I think it'd probably be better for us to ask questions as opposed to open-ended presentations. As a reminder, Mr. Wormsley has recused himself based on some conflicts of interest resulting from his employment. And so I would recommend that we have the information in front of us. We have Mr. Dilbeck, Mr. Potter, Mr. Muse, Mr. Evans, and Mr. Dunaway available if we have questions specifically for any of them. I'll remind everyone who has filed affidavits with the board to this point. These are affidavits that have been filed under oath, and you know, the board does not have the authority to investigate and prosecute fraud, but you know, should any of the information that's been filed with the board be alleged to be fraudulent, and you know, the board would have to cooperate with any investigation that would be done by the appropriate law enforcement agencies. And so you all know what you've signed on to. I don't have to remind you of that, but I did just want to get it out there that we are dealing with information that's under oath. We're trying to get this right based on what we've got in front of us. And with that, it's Mr. Dilbeck's application, so I would suggest that we start with any questions we have for Mr. Dilbeck. So, any questions from Ms. McCord or Mr. Fortner? Or?
Not really. I mean, I've read all 200 pages of this. We have conflicting statements under oath from different parties. So I went back and looked at our original submission back in 2015 to see, you know, because I think it was alleged that we made a mistake at that point in granting certification. And I looked through it again to see, did we miss something? And I don't see anything that we missed. I mean, we have a notarized signature from Mr. Potter who says that Mr. Dilbeck was a supervisor from 2008 till the present time. You know, I understand Mr. Dunaway's conversation about all the accounting, but Mr. Marlowe, I think it was, he admitted during his deposition that he doesn't know what happens in the field. Or something to that effect. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't grant authorization or grant certification again at this time.
I do want to ask just a couple questions. We've got the affidavits on the record, but we've also got Mr. Dilbeck and Mr. Potter here. So Mr. Potter, you filed the affidavit stating that you made Mr. Dilbeck a supervisor in 2008, correct? And so, you know, based on that title change in 2008, what we don't have evidence of is any change in his pay. And, you know, we talked about the statute not requiring a certain salary, but just in your own words, why wasn't the pay increased along with what appeared to be a promotion in title?
Well, at the time, we were certainly in the middle of a budget. We were in February. We didn't have money appropriated to give a raise with, which eventually I did give Mr. Dilbeck a raise. I did. His salary became $15 and some change. I don't have that actually in front of me, so I did give him a raise. If you'll notice on that affidavit or that ad change form, the date is February 28, 2008. Now, the first time I ran for road superintendent was in 2004. intentions of this ever happening today. I wish I was that smart. I would be road superintendent, and I certainly would become clerk and master. I would be president of the United States if I was that smart right now. But we didn't falsify anything by any means. Didn't try to falsify. And Mr. Dillback had been with the highway department for 23 years. He was clearly the guy that needed to step up and take the reins when the time came. He's just the right man for the job. He's just the right man for the job. I have nothing to gain by being here to help Mr. Dillback today whatsoever. I'm clerk of the court, clerk and master appointed by the 8th Chancellor Judge Elizabeth Asbury. I can't lie, and I'm not going to lie. And I'm here to open any questions that anybody has. Grab up behind what's
So, Mr. Dillbeck, you submitted a list of projects last year in your initial application that you said you supervised from 2008 onward. That list was submitted to us under oath last year. You still stand by that list of projects you submitted?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Potter, to the extent that you were there at the time that he completed the work listed in his affidavit, can you verify that you did assign him to supervise what he listed last year?
I will.
All right, so we've got the sworn statement from both Mr. Dillbeck and Mr. Potter. Any response from either of you to the questions regarding the Fair Labor Standards Act that Mr. Dunaway has raised? Is that the board's job is to determine whether or not any applicant has the requisite experience for us to make a decision on certification. The rate of pay, the title, those are all factors. I'm not sure any of them are dispositive. But is there any response that either of you have to the allegations he's making about any FLSA violation? No.
Well, if I could read you something real short.
So we're getting some feedback on the phone. I don't know if someone has it on speaker. If you're not speaking, could you mute your line?
Thank you. It was bleeding in for us too. We couldn't hear you.
So,
Like I said before, when this ad change form was done, I ran 2 elections and won both of them. I didn't falsify anything intentionally. Right before Mr. Dillback got appointed, this paperwork was clearly done in my first term of office, and the finance director signed off on it. And at that time, I never heard any response that there was anything wrong. If there was a payroll issue, that has nothing to do with us. They do all that. If there was a problem with them internally in the finance office about anything, they didn't respond back to me and say that there was at the time. I voted to fire Mr. Marlowe. Mr. Marlowe doesn't like me personally, okay, because I was on the FMS committee. That's where this is stemming from, but he signed off on this. That's what the problem is. It's not that Mr. Dillback is qualified. It's just, and ultimately, if this board certifies Mr. Ron Dillback and he gets his name on the ballot, there's going to be 40,716 people that's going to recertify him in our county if he's the right man. They'll let you know if you've done the right thing, because our taxpayers will vote on this thing. It's not that you're going to make him road superintendent. You're just going to give him a right to run for road superintendent. The hard part's running. It's not this thing. He's certified. The 40,000 people will let you know if you've done the right thing here today. I promise you. But anyway, getting back to this. Statute 54-7-109, it tells the duties of the Chief Administrative Officer. The Chief Administrative Officer is authorized to determine the total number of employees of the County Highway Department, to determine personnel policies, set work hours, and to establish job classifications. set in place so the highway superintendent has the reins to do what he needs to do to protect our county and our citizens. So that's why the finance director has no authorization to tell the highway superintendent what he can and can't do. All they can do is pass our budget, and we have to live within those means. But they can't tell us how to run our job. There's laws to protect us too. So that's what I see. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer any. I promise you.
Any more questions for Mr. Dillbeck or Mr. Potter?
Yeah, I do. According to the Fair Labor Standards Act, or along those lines, as a supervisor in another type of government, we pay our supervisors overtime. And I don't see that as a violation of Fair Labor Standards Act, because I asked our human resources officer yesterday. Do you do the same thing with other supervisors in?
We do. We have another supervisor, not just Mr. Gilbeck. We have another supervisor, but actually our safety director who worked for us at our quarry, our rock quarry. So we crush our own stone, from the quarry. He was a safety director. We paid him overtime, but his job title on his ad change form is supposed to be sent to you today, and I guess we didn't get it at the time. It actually says safety director. And we changed him from a laborer to a safety director. He was a supervisor for Mr. Stone, so. But we didn't create any kind of big out of that. We're not here for that. We're here to make sure that Mr. Gilbeck truly and duly has the right to be our road superintendent.
Any other questions for Mr. Dillbeck or Mr. Potter?
Mr. Dodd, this is Dave Dunaway. I have some questions.
Well, we'll get to you in just a minute.
Well, it goes to the question of whether he's telling you all the truth today, because I have information that would show that he's not being honest with you.
Well, we're about to ask you about your side of the story. So
I mean, are you going to accept that testimony, which isn't under oath today, without my questioning? He said he had no dog in this fight. He does, and I'd like to show you what that dog is.
Well, we'll ask you what that dog is in a minute. But
All right,
first,
very good.
Mr. Dillbeck, Mr. Potter, anything else that you want to say to us before we let the challengers say their piece?
No, really, I just want to tell you, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and thank the board for the opportunity also. And I've been here for 23 years, and I put my heart in the highway department for the last year, almost a half now, being road superintendent. I will continue to do that. That's my life. I'm there 24/7. But like I said, I appreciate y'all for the opportunity. So thanks.
I have one other question as far as just reading through this deposition, and it brought to mind. Either one of you, I guess, can answer. But as far as how the road department is set up, you had, from what I understood, it was or I guess what I understood from the challenger's response was that there's a road superintendent, Mr. Potter at the time, and then there was Mr. Muse.
Right.
And then there was no other supervisors at all. That's what it made me to believe, but I don't, maybe I'm just reading something wrong. But
No,
can you explain the hierarchy or the what do you call it, the flow chart of the highway department?
Mr. Muse is clearly the assistant road superintendent. Done a fine job, a good guy. Done a fine job with me. The whole time he's with me. He's a great employee. But that's not to say that Mr. Gilbeck wasn't a supervisor also. I mean, we're not saying that Mr. Muse was not the assistant road superintendent. He was. I mean, I'm not saying that he's not. He was. And done a good job. I have no problems with it. We had Mr. Gilbeck as a supervisor also. I mean, there's no statute says we can't have both, and we did. That's what we did. And if Mr. Marlowe wasn't paying people properly, they do pay for payroll. We have an HR department, and they do it. They do our payroll, they do HR, and they do everything in the finance office. Shame on him for not doing his job right, but that didn't have anything to do with us. If we submitted him paperwork, and if he didn't do his job right, that's on him. It ain't on us. He signed off on this in 2008, and like I said, payroll supervisor signed off, finance director signed off on it. If there was a problem, somebody should have said something. Yeah, they didn't say anything.
So what other supervisors were in the department at the time that, I guess, 2015? What other supervisors were there?
We had one more who was our safety director. Sandy Franklin was our safety director at the Rockville. And if you look in the dictionary, you know, he was over our safety. I mean, he was the main director, kind of speaks for himself. He was classified as supervisor too.
So how did the duties of Mr. Dilbeck and Mr. Muse differ? What were their job duties?
Mr. Muse was, as I would have work orders for that needed to be done, and projects needed to be done, I relayed those messages to Mr. Muse. He went out and made sure everything got carried out. Now, Mr. Dilbeck, he handled a various array of different things. I mean, he carried out day-to-day activities too. Mr. Muse basically carried out the whole. He did pretty much everything, but Mr. Dilbeck, I guess it's like you got an affidavit from paving crew. Well, Mark Marlowe with Rogers Group sent an affidavit that said that he was sent out to go with the paving crews to kind of oversee, pick up tickets, make sure that everything was being done, and if there was an apron, when they were making that apron, was it going to create a water issue? Was it going to? Do we need to do a little something there to make sure that water didn't go down in somebody's property, do damage to them, or oversee mowing operations, check on mowers, make sure they had what they needed to mow for the day. Striping, he went out with all the striping crew that done our striping. He was clearly the guy who done that. You got an affidavit in front of you that says he did that. That's stuff that he did every day. I mean, and it was everything. In summertime, it was mowing, and when we were paving, it was maybe striping and paving. We just did a lot of different things, and I leaned on Mr. Muse, and I leaned on Mr. Dilbeck to help me on my job duties. Both of them done a good job. Both of them did. I just hate this come to this. I really have.
Further questions? Rachel? Yep. All right, so with that, Mr. Dunaway, Mr. Evans, Mr. Hughes, we will turn our attention your way.
All right, thank you.
And I will extend first the opportunity to the board to ask questions of any of you. And then, Mr. Dunaway, I understand that there's a few things you'll want to say in response to some of what we just heard, but I do want to open it up to the board for questions first, for either Mr. Muse, Mr. Evans, or Mr. Dunaway. And I'll start with Mr. Evans, because we just haven't heard a lot from him yet in terms of looking at this application this year. And so, Mr. Evans, you don't work, and I don't believe you have worked for the Highway Department. And so what's your relationship to the Highway Department in Campbell County? I guess the question is what grounds do you have so the board knows that you have firsthand knowledge of what's going on day to day at the Highway Department when you don't work there?
Yes, I'm a part owner in Evans & Evans Construction Company. We build county bridges, and I've worked in Campbell County for probably the last 30 years. And so we've done many bridges in Campbell County. We usually get them, they're local for us. And every time that I've built a bridge, I've always dealt with Blackie Muse, knew he was the assistant. And never seen Ron Dilbeck, didn't know who he was. And part of our situation, we do the state aid bridge programs, what we work on. Part of our system is to coordinate with the county, because when it was 20-80% match, the county had to do a lot of the work themselves. Okay, and so I would have to coordinate with the county to get the bridge completed, to get it backfilled and everything, and complete my guardrail section of the job. And then they would have to do the paving. And it was always Blackie Muse. So I was surprised when they put Ron Dilbeck's name in, because I've never seen him supervise or do anything and didn't know him. And so he was never on any of the projects that I seen. And like I said, I live here in Campbell County, and I go by some of the stuff they do every day, and I never saw him doing any supervising of any crew anywhere. And I asked,
How much work have you done for the county? What percentage of your work is county work?
oh, we've probably built 20-some bridges in Campbell County over the last 30 years. And what I did is I went and asked questions, because I was being told that Ron Dilbeck had never done that. And that's what got me into the challenge last year, was that everybody I was running into said he's never done this work. He's not a supervisor. He's never been over anybody. And so then I went and looked at the payroll records, and knowing that Blackie Muse was the supervisor, I looked at the difference between them, and I looked at how it's stated, and definitely in the payroll records it does not show him as being a supervisor, not in highway maintenance at all, and it doesn't list him as a supervisor even in the category that he is, which is in equipment maintenance. I started asking individuals, I asked former employees, current employees, and a lot of them told me, no, he's never done this. I refused to take any of the current employees and ask them for affidavits last year, because I did not know this process would have to take a lawyer to get it straightened out. I thought that Junes had the ability to actually look into it. And so when I sat down and talked to these people, I did not ask them, because I figured that if I didn't get elected, those guys would get to be fired. And so I did not want to put those people in that type of situation. I wouldn't want a job that were to cost somebody, for me, a chance to have the position to cost them their jobs. And I have an uncle, he's one of them, Robert Dixon is one that has worked with Ron, and I asked him. And I also went and called Mike Leach. It was probably one of
Mr.
the
Dixon's
first.
affidavit's been filed.
Yes.
This time.
Well, let me pause right there. I mean, and I understand that Mr. Leach passed away, and we do have the letter from him. But quite frankly, the time period we're looking at is after Mr. Leach was the road superintendent. Mr. Potter became road superintendent in 2004. We don't have any evidence in front of us that Mr. Dilbeck was made a supervisor before 2008, and so I don't know why Mr. Leach's testimony is relevant to us.
And I'll only add, the only reason it would have been relevant, Mr. Dodd, was in his original affidavit, both Mr. Dilbeck and Mr. Potter talked about this 20 years that Mr. Dilbeck says he had, which basically, as Mr. Leach points out, he was never anything other than a parts boy or a flagger. That's why it's relevant. It wasn't 20 years.
Mr. Evans, let me come back to you because I understand that you went to Mr. Marlowe and got this payroll record that was filed by you and filed by Mr. Dilbeck. Starting in 2008 on this job classification description sheet as of December 18, 2014, Mr. Dilbeck is listed as a supervisor. Are you disputing that he was listed as a supervisor on the payroll records?
On that section, if you know how to read those records and the way they explain to me, there is a series of numbers out from there. Now, in that job title, you can title anybody any name you want to. You can call them king, you can call them president, anything you want to call them. It does not affect their pay or what they're doing. It's just a way of separating out. If you had multiple supervisors, you could separate those by giving them a different name at that point. It does not affect their pay, does not affect what they're doing. The way the accounting system goes is the first 3 digits of that number states that it's the highway department. The 5 digits in between that states what department of the highway they work in. And in Ron Dilbeck's, if you'll look at it, it always says equipment maintenance. operation of equipment maintenance. I don't have that in front of me, but that's about what it is. And then with Blackie Muse, you can see that he's over the roads, maintenance of the roads. Actually, what you're asking for certification. Okay, the last 3 digits classifies whether they're a laborer, a foreman, or supervisor. Those numbers change. That's why I tried to point out last year that I don't care what you put in that job title, and this is what I've been told, and this is what Jeff Marlowe, I believe, will confirm, because that's where I got it from. Those digits, those numbers tell you what this guy's supposed to have been doing, how he was paid. Now, if you look also, because the way that it's paid and the way you have overtime, a supervisor is paid salary. So Mr. Muse's was based on per day. Mr. Dilbeck's was by the hour, so he was an hourly employee. So that made a big difference in me right there, just looking at that and saying, well, wait a minute, he's never been shown. Even if there's budget restraints, as Mr. Potter says, it wouldn't apply. Why did he not move him into the right department? And it would be up to Mr. Potter to submit the paperwork saying, move him into this department and pay him a salary pay instead of by the hour to classify him as that. And what it is most everybody's payroll records reflects, it goes with them on down through their life. So you want to get that right. And so it was never done, so I don't think it was never changed. That's what he did. He was in the operation as far as just the equipment maintenance, and that's what I've been told, and I've talked to many individuals that know him, and they just shake their head and say, no, he never did that work.
Other questions for Mr. Evans?
Maybe not just a question, but a statement, and I looked at my original notes from the appeal in 2015, and when we approved Mr. Dilbeck, and we had some discussion about it, and the note that I wrote is that the appeal provided us the statement that said his job title was changed to supervisor. So I mean that's what we had to go on, and again I see nothing to differ from the earlier decision that we made. So.
Well, that's the situation. Is if you listen to the testimony of Jeff Marlowe, you will find out that job title listed as supervisor wasn't enough to actually prove that he was supervisor. It should have been changed in the other, and it would have been up to Mr. Potter, who signs all add change forms, to make that official. Like you said, in that first title, you can call them anything you want to, but it does not apply to what they're doing. It's just a way of separating out different laborers, different things, and just giving them little different titles so that you can distinguish between them in your payroll records. But it's not part of their as far as what they do. It's not that it doesn't apply.
Well, let's get back to that, because you guys are saying, I think the same thing that we're saying is it doesn't matter what he's called, it doesn't matter what he's paid, it matters what he's done, and that's that's what we're here to try to figure out, is what he's done. The titles and the dollars are factors, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's about what he's done. And what we have is a list of work that Mr. Dilbeck has said that he did as a supervisor between 2008 and being certified last year. We have Mr. Potter affidavit supporting that he put Mr. Dilbeck in a position to supervise the things he said he supervised. So what evidence does the board have that he didn't do what he says he did? And that can go to any of you who want to pitch in on.
All right. Now, are we ready for me to go to the next witness, and I will straighten that out for you?
Go right ahead. I mean, that's the question at this point. We certified Mr. Dilbeck based on what board did.
Sure.
And so we need evidence that he didn't do what he swore he did before we can reach a contrary decision.
Sure.
So
Thank you.
Make your case.
All right. One of the things you didn't have, and I'm going to be my next witness, is Blackie Muse. and who Mr. Potter has now conceded was in fact the assistant road superintendent. Mr. Muse, you have heard the testimony today. I'm going to ask you for the last 10.5 years, up until April of 2015, were you in fact the assistant road superintendent?
I was.
And would you tell the board what your jobs were, what you did on a day-to-day basis versus what Mr. Dilbeck? Who was over Mr. Dilbeck in the field?
I was over Dilbeck.
All right. Now, did Mr. Potter ever come into the field to do the things that you did?
No.
All right. Tell the board what you did.
I supervised all work, distributed the men out, and done all the work to see that it got done. Just whatever was to be done, I overseed it. Dilbeck was only a parts boy.
All right. Did he also do, you've seen this affidavit that Jason Davis filed that he was out there with them when they were doing striping. Did you ever assign to this man any supervisory responsibilities over striping? That is Mr. Dilbeck.
No, it was contracted out to them. Dilbeck was only to control the traffic and flag for them.
And is that what he was, a flagger?
That's what he was at.
Was he ever a supervisor over any of that?
No.
Now, let's go to the situation with regard to this paving, which was with Rogers Group, and they submitted an affidavit by Mr. Marlowe, which doesn't say anything about highway construction or highway maintenance. Did you ever assign to Mr. Dilbeck the job of supervising Rogers Group?
No.
Tell the board how that works.
It's contracted out. I go by and check on them every now and then to see if they did a good job when they get done. We have no control over their men or anything going on at their jobs. It's all contracted out.
Did Mr. Potter at any time ever tell you that he had appointed this man, Mr. Dilbeck, as a supervisor?
No.
To your knowledge, as the assistant road superintendent, was this man ever paid anything other than by the hour?
By the hours, all he ever was paid.
And with regard to overtime, are you paid overtime?
No.
Was Mr. Dilbeck, however, as an hourly employee in those categories to which Mr. Evans referred, in equipment maintenance, was he paid overtime?
Yes, he was paid overtime.
Did that have anything to do with highway construction or highway maintenance?
No.
All right. Now, and of course, Mr. You've seen the affidavits and you've seen the deposition and you were present during the deposition of Mr. Marlowe. That is Jeff Marlowe.
True.
All right. Now, you've seen the affidavit of Mr. Potter's. He says that due to budget constraints, he didn't raise Mr. Dilbeck's salary. Is that a true statement?
No.
All right. I'm going to ask you. I have, and we've looked at your pay records, and your pay records reflect, in fact, during the time he says he was under budget constraints, Mr. Potter recommended for you, and you did receive almost an $8,000 pay raise. As a matter of fact, from the time he says that he was under budget constraints, your salary went from $42,000 up to $49,783, and then on August 18, 2013, that same year that he left, or the year before he left and resigned, your salary was $50,283.
This is true.
All right, were you under any budget constraints?
Nope.
Now, when Mr. Potter says that, is he being truthful with this board?
It's false.
Thank you. Now, who did all of the scheduling?
I did.
Who did the man answer to as far as any orders that were given in the field, either for highway maintenance or highway construction? Who was over that?
Me.
Did Mr. Dilbeck have anything to do with that?
No.
All right. Tell the court, or tell this board, if you would, please. You worked this man day to day in the field.
True.
Did he answer to anybody but you?
He only answered to me.
Did he have the authority to tell anybody else what to do?
He had no authority at all.
Who communicated all of that?
Me.
Now, Mr. Potter says he doesn't have a dog in this fight. One of the things he hasn't shared with, and this was regard whether it's Rogers Group or whether it is with respect to striping, those are supposed to be bids, are they not?
This is true.
All right, now, are you familiar with Mr. Potter's wife?
Yes, I am.
What was the job she had in the middle of all this while this was going on with reference to the bids, either for Rogers Group
Mr. Dodd, this is about my wife. This is not
sir,
about something else.
he said he had no dog in this fight, Mr. Dodd. You said you'd give me the opportunity to show that he did, and he's not being honest with you. I'm going to show you what he does.
Let pause for a minute here.
Okay. I didn't get the question.
Is any of this relevant to Mr. Dilbeck's qualification?
It is. It is as to why they would fraudulently go out so there would be no change in the bidding process, so that these people who have given you affidavits who are suspect as to why they're still doing business with this county, because his wife is still over the bidding process and these people continue to be rewarded. That's what you need to understand, on top of the fact there is a serious problem right now with regard to a fraud allegation that was made against Mr. Potter at the same time he was resigning on the use of off-road fuel. He was supposed to have on-road fuel, and the state got cheated out of taxes, and this fuel damaged ambulances to the extent of $18,000, of which Mr. Potter has been personally sued.
All right,
Now, that's
Mr. Dilbeck, do you have anything to do with that off-road fuel?
I was sued by him.
All right, I understand. Does Mr. Dilbeck have anything to do with that fuel?
No, no, sir.
He does
So
now.
I'm not really interested in hearing. more about
Okay, it's
that.
relevant. I would point out. I would point out.
I'm not interested in hearing about my wife.
Well, it's not whether you're interested, sir. It's to the
I've
board.
heard all I want to hear about.
You may have, but you hear from this man, and you're being paid today as clerk and master, and yet you're in Nashville. So I think it's very relevant.
You got a problem, you talk to the chancellor about that.
That's not my problem with the chancellor. It's yours and the taxpayers, not mine.
All right. This is not a meeting to consider pending litigation between Mr. Dunaway and Mr. Parker on an unrelated matter.
I just wanted to show, he said he didn't have a dog in the fight, he had no reason. I wanted to show he has motivation to lie.
You made your point.
Thank you.
Point.
All right.
And we're
Let me go on to the rest. Let me go on to the rest of it. All right. Now, you have read all of this. These statements he's made and all these jobs he said he did and supervised. Is any of that true?
It's false.
All right. Tell the highway board why it is false.
Because he's lying. I was in charge of all daily work on roads, maintenance, and scheduling. Dilbeck was only get parts, flag, and was at my discretion to tell him what to do.
Was he a supervisor over either of those?
No,
Would either of those jobs have anything to do with highway maintenance or highway construction?
no.
Now, at this particular point, I would point out, even Mr. Potter has conceded that this man was Mr. Muse was the assistant supervisor. Here's where you have three wrongs that have occurred in this situation. If you look at the statute, the only person who could have been appointed administratively.
Let me stop you here real quick too. Are you about to go into 547107?
Yes, sir.
Because that's not relevant to us.
Well, it is relevant for the fact that Mr. Dilbeck says he's got this experience that he's counting, but he can't use a year and a month as his experience for qualification of this. And I would remind you that by the act, there's a special act with regard to 547104. He cannot use the fact that he is an incumbent because, first of all, he never ran for this position. Second of all, with respect to the statutory exemptions for an incumbent, they only apply to Bledsoe County, Carroll County, Hancock County, Hawkins County, Jackson County, Perry County, Stewart County, or Wayne County. Nowhere.
And let me stop you there. As we've discussed, the only evidence that the board typically requires of an individual who has been previously certified, whether they are an incumbent or not, is proof of their prior certification. And so that's what we're dealing with in terms of Mr. Dilbeck.
Right.
You're correct in that he he's not grandfathered in under any previous version of the
Thank you.
statute,
Thank you.
based on the timing. But that's, again, not what we're dealing with.
All right.
So
All right.
let's talk. You've had the opportunity to ask Mr. Muse a lot of questions to try to get some information before the board.
Yes.
Let's let the board talk to Mr. Muse.
Very good. Very good.
As Mr. Potter and Mr. Dilbeck have said, nobody's disputing the fact that Mr. Muse was the assistant road superintendent. But, I guess my first question for Mr. Muse is, are you disputing that Mr. Dilbeck was made a supervisor in some capacity in 2008?
He never was no supervisor.
What about the document we have signed by Mr. Potter, submitted to the county finance office that changed his title to supervisor? Are you alleging that that's false?
That is very false.
And then what evidence does the board have that he was not a supervisor, at least by title, from 2008 on? We've got the document signed by Mr. Potter. We've got the county payroll records provided by Mr. Marlowe. Am I missing something, that he wasn't actually called a supervisor from 2008 onward?
He never was a supervisor. I would at least know. Somebody should have told me. But nobody told me anything about no supervisor. When I told Potter that he would not qualify for no road superintendent, he said he was going to fix it. And so he falsified the papers, and he couldn't go back to all these other payroll records because you can't change them. He falsified everything he could. It's all fraudulent, every bit of it.
We've got a document that was filed in 2008. Are you alleging he backdated a document to 2008 and got Mr. Marlowe, who we've already established he has some personal differences with, to comply and backdating those payroll records? Without some harder evidence, I'm just having trouble believing that happened.
You heard Marlowe in the tape, if you listen to it, said that was fixed not for this. So it wouldn't hurt him to go back and backdate a paper because he's lying about all this other stuff. What would it bother him on this?
So are you saying that Mr. Marlowe backdated this document?
No, Mr. Potter.
Well, Mr. Marlowe signed it on March 5th, 2008.
That's true, what you're saying there. But did you hear Marlowe in the tape? Did you listen to it?
We read the
transcript. And Marlowe said he didn't know what goes on in the field.
He didn't say nothing about the field when he was talking about that. He said that paper was not meant to go to there, to Nashville, to be qualified for anything. You didn't listen to it.
No, we understand that Mr. Marlowe has not filed anything with the board. We understand that. But also the public records provided by Mr. Marlowe to Mr. Dilbeck, to Mr. Evans, to Mr. Dunaway, all of these documents, Mr. Marlowe didn't file them, but they have been filed, and that doesn't mean that just because he didn't file them here doesn't mean that they're not properly before us. That 2008 title change is a document that we don't have any evidence is fraudulent.
Well, you got the paper, ain't you?
We've got a paper.
You got a paper. If I sign something and send it down there, does that make it's true? Does it make it true?
It's been submitted under oath that it is. It was signed in 2008. It's got a timestamp on it from 2008. The payroll records, separate from that document, indicate that the title change was applied in 2008. What are we missing that title and wasn't changed in 2008?
Because he sent it to him as fraud. There was no problem for him to fill out a paper. He had to fix it somehow, didn't he?
We're talking about an 8-year-old document. Are you alleging
That
that
paper
he
is
backdated
not.
this document? Is that what
He
you're alleging?
backdated the whole thing. It's all a lie. How was he going to fix it?
Well, let me ask him, Mr. Potter. it's been alleged that you said you were gonna fix it. Did you have a conversation like that with Mr. Muse?
I didn't, and why would I fix it? I mean, that's the point.
Well,
What do I have?
if we're gonna get into that, I would show why he wanted to fix it.
And again, let me finish.
Let me ask something right now.
Mr. Dunaway?
It's not me, it's Mr. Muse.
It's me, it's Mr. Muse.
Okay, Mr. Muse, Mr. Potter's got the floor, and we're not gonna get into a running dialogue between the two of you or between anyone else. We're gonna give Mr. Potter an opportunity to speak here.
Well, if we're going, and Mr. Chairman, the only reason I would say if he's going to get into that again as to why, he's going to open that door, then I want to be able to show why. Otherwise, I'd like to stick to the facts.
Well, then let's just cut this off right here. Does anyone have any evidence that this document in 2008 is fraudulent?
Yes, Mr. Marlowe's affidavit, in fact, if you'll see, he did not certify to this board. He said he had no intention to this board. He merely changed the title because Mr. Potter changed the title, but this man was never paid out of anything other than the parts and equipment. He was never paid out of highway maintenance or highway construction. That's why it's fraudulent, and that was all arranged by Mr. Potter on behalf of Mr. Dilbeck. Mr. Marlowe has said that in his deposition, which is sworn under oath, before a court of law. None of the things that Mr. Potter is saying today is before a court of law, nor is it under oath.
Help me out, Mr. Dunaway, or
Sure.
Mr. Muse, Mr. Evans, whoever. The document that was filed in 2008 does not purport to change the way that Mr. Dilbeck was paid or from where he was paid. The document provided by Mr. Marlowe that summarizes Mr. Dilbeck's salary and titles over the last several years does not try to indicate that he was paid from any account or given a title other than what the paperwork said. The issue here is what he did on a day-to-day basis.
That's right, and the only person who would have knowledge of that would be this man who was the overall supervisor in the field. And that's why we've got to give more, as Mr.
I was elected official.
Doesn't,
Mr. Dunaway, who was Mr. Muse's supervisor?
well, according to the statute, the road superintendent would be, but just likewise, the only person who should have been appointed interim would have been this guy. Under Mr. Potter's own testimony, Mr. Dilbeck wouldn't have qualified because he wasn't the chief administrative officer.
And again, that interim successor period under 54-7-107 is just...
No, but it's to the heart of whether he's telling you the truth. He's not telling you the truth.
Well, let me ask Mr. Muse the question.
Sure.
Given that Mr. Potter was the road superintendent and was the overall supervisor of the department, and understanding that you were the assistant road superintendent, and that's not being disputed, is there anything that would prevent Mr. Potter, as the road superintendent, from asking an employee other than you, Mr. Muse, to supervise some work?
Well, most of the work, if Potter wanted something done outside of what I was already doing and taking care of the roads and stuff, he would call me and I would have somebody go do it for him. Other than that, Potter didn't fool with what was going on. If he needed something done, he would just call me. Somebody had a complaint that he wanted me to check into, I'd go do it. But the only problem with Dilbeck did no supervising, no road work of any kind. If he flagged, that don't count what you're wanting. You want somebody that actually did the work. And the work that Potter said right there, if you listen to him, the work was done through me. And didn't have nothing to do with Dilbeck. Potter's own words.
Mr. Potter's filed 2 affidavits that in his own words, say otherwise.
Well, you just heard him speak a while ago, and he said just the opposite.
And I would point out that nowhere in those affidavits does Mr. Potter say that this man supervised highway construction or highway maintenance. Nowhere. And he's had 2 opportunities last year. He didn't do it last time, which is why we reconvened. He didn't do it this time. He just uses this generic title. And as you pointed out, it ain't a matter of the title. It's what you actually do in the field. And his own affidavit doesn't help him.
Why would I do something to make him a supervisor?
There you go again, Mr. Chairman. If we're going to get into why, I'll show why.
In February of 25, February the 25th of 2008, I was in my first term of office.
That's not what we're here about, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm going to explain to you.
Mr. Chairman.
If I would have falsified papers.
Mr. Chairman, I thought this was our time on the floor.
It's not.
Mr. Chairman.
My first term of office. I hear you, Mr. Evans. The reason Mr. Evans is there because I just absolutely annihilated him in an election, and he can't stand the fact that I beat him.
Well,
Now we're getting into personalities, and we're going to do that. Then I want to examine these lies.
Just a moment. We're not, this is a very personal matter. I get that, but, the personal differences between Mr. Potter and Mr. Evans, between Mr. Potter and Mr. Dunaway, between Mr. Dilbeck and Mr. Muse, none of these personal issues are relevant to this board. The issues that are relevant to this board are whether or not Mr. Dilbeck has done what he said he did.
That's right.
So,
I agree.
So let me ask Mr. Fortner, let me ask Ms. McCord, do you have any additional questions at this time for the challengers based on what's been presented to us so far?
I don't have any other questions.
All right, Mr. Dunaway, our time is running short.
Sure.
We like we said, we've got a pretty exhaustive paper record of what's alleged to have occurred here. Can you sum up?
Yes. Yes.
And
I can sum up very quickly. If you look no farther than your regulations, and all you have to do is what supervisory capacity is defined, and these people who came before you, and I heard you today make some great challenges to their qualifications. Supervisory capacity means, and this is directly out of the regs, having direct, quote, direct, not subdirect, direct oversight or management of other persons involved in the, quote, actual highway construction or maintenance activities so that the supervisor directs the methods, the equipment, and the standards of the work performed and is responsible for the timely completion and quality of the work. I've heard nothing in Mr. Dilbeck's affidavits, not even the ones he submitted, have even alluded to that. Supervisory capacity further means that the person, in this case Mr. Dilbeck, has, quote, the authority to determine whether the work was performed according to the applicable specifications. Why is that? Because unless you have an engineering background, which the statute otherwise requires, or you have been certified, or you have the engineering background plus that, or you have the 4 years, you want to let the public know that there's a reason so that we don't have a waste of their tax dollars and it's out there. You do it right and you don't have, as we've got right now, a lawsuit with the state over a bridge because an unlicensed or unqualified subcontractor was used. That's the purpose. This man, by his own affidavits, does not qualify. If you stop right there, he goes no further because he doesn't meet the definitions of that. If you look at the definition for highway construction, you'll also see that one of the things highway construction does not include, and this is from the board, inspection of highway construction, quote, unless the inspector is also the party responsible for the supervision of the construction project. We've never heard at one time that this man was responsible for any particular construction project. And as a matter of fact, the affidavits and Mr. Dilbeck, who was the man in charge, or excuse me, Mr. Potter, Muse, who was the man in charge, it didn't happen. Mr. Potter, for him to give a title, that's like I told you last time. Everybody can say they're Elvis, but that don't make you Elvis. That's it.
All right. Well, okay. So, the board, based on the evidence that Mr. Dilbeck filed last year, determined that we did feel like he met the qualifications established both in the statute and as further elaborated in our guideline. And so, the board has a difference of opinion, I think, with you that he has never,
Well, are you telling me the opinion before you even heard from the board? I mean, I'm surprised. I mean, I haven't heard a vote. I mean, as a matter of fact.
I'm not establishing our opinion this year. I'm telling you
okay. Well, what I'm saying is, let me point out.
Our opinion last year was that he met the statutory qualifications that he had.
And I understand that. And the reason I understand that is, as you pointed out, you didn't have the authority to go beyond those affidavits. There was nobody who questioned those. Mr. Evans has already told you what happened with his situation, but I'll remind you this. Even this board, under 42 U.S.C. 1983, 1985, and 1986, when something is brought to your attention, you have a duty not to neglect to protect either the public or to protect those other people who are interested. Otherwise,
but you think we spent the last hour?
I know. Otherwise, it's a deprivation. What I'm saying is,
we're doing.
Last year doesn't matter for purposes of this year. Last year does not matter. That's why I don't even want to allude to last year, because you didn't have, either through your constraints or whatever. I'm not criticizing you for making the decision you had with what you had to work with. The problem is nobody went beyond. They've done that. And two wrongs, as I pointed out, do not make a right.
Well, let me finish. You got your chance to wrap up. I was trying to do the same.
All right.
We, based on what was filed last year, determined that Mr. Dilbeck met the statutory qualifications, that he met the definitions we've established in our guidelines. When he refiled to run for the office this year, we obviously have had a lot more information brought to our attention. I thank the board for its diligence in reading several hundred pages of material we have, and for questioning the individuals who have been made available to help us try to sort this out. At this point, does the board have any more questions for anyone who has submitted information to us? All right, hearing none, is any member of the board ready to make a motion based on the evidence in front of us? And I would encourage any motion to clearly state the grounds for whatever action you're moving we take.
I'll make a statement before I make the motion. I just went back through the 2015 qualifications, and I took out some of the, when I counted up the total number of months of experience, I took out the ones that were supervising striping and paving, and still came up with more than the statutory requirements of the 4 years experience. And again, I see no reason to, we have signed affidavits, we have everything in front of us. I know we have disputes, but still, I stand by our decision in 2015, so therefore I make the motion that we approve this in 2016.
And for the record, Mr. Chairman, for the record, who was that? I didn't get his name.
That was motion approved by Mr. Fortner.
Mr. Fortner, okay, thank you.
And we've got a second by Ms. McCord. Given the nature of this proceeding, Kathy, if you could take a roll call vote on certifying Mr. Dilbeck.
Mr. Portner?
Yes.
Ms. McCord? Yes. Mr. Dodd?
Yes. And based on that vote, Mr. Dilbeck, at this time we have recertified your application for this year's ballot. I thank you all for your participation. Feel free to follow up with any questions that you may have after our meeting. In terms of other business, I do want to make the board aware that the bill that would create a statutory challenge process has passed and is on the governor's desk for his signature. Presuming that bill is signed, a new challenge process will go into effect on July the 1st of this year, and we will take the appropriate actions to adjust our guidelines between now and then. But if there's no further business,
Mr. Dodd, just thank you for allowing us to participate by phone. We appreciate it.
yes, sir, and thank you for I think this one went a little better than last time, and I appreciate your help in that. So,
Thank you, sir.
if there's no further business, we'll